All right, this is Math 209, Week 2, Section 6.4. We're going to be factoring still, but now it's going to be a little easy because it's a thing called difference of two squares. So we're going to be using that box method to factor, and so what we've got here is we've got x squared minus 49. And so when we make our box over here, we see that the x squared always, of course, goes in that upper left-hand corner. And then we got this negative 49, so that's going to go down here. And you'll notice we have no terms right here. Well, that's because they cancel each other out. So it's going to be like we're going to have a positive 3 and a negative 3, and they're going to cancel each other out. And that's why we don't have that third term of our trinomial. So we know we're going to begin with x and x. Now down here in 49, well, the only way to get 49 is 7 and 7. All right. So sure enough, x times x gives you x squared. 7 times 7 is going to give you 49, but we need a negative 49, which means one of these 7's has to be a negative, the other has to be a positive, and sure enough, when we multiply, you're going to get positive 7x here, you're going to get negative 7x here. So if we were to combine like terms, x squared is just x squared. These two terms right here cancel each other out because you have positive 7 and positive 7x and negative 7x. And then you've got this negative 49 left over. So you get 7x squared, you get x squared minus 49, and that's exactly what we wanted. So what are our factors? It's x plus 7, that's right here, and then you have x minus 7 right there, and that is your factor. So we're going to do more of the same. So you got x squared minus 1. So you've got x squared minus 1. So our box over here, we know we've got x squared here, we've got negative 1 here. The only way to get x squared is to do x times x. The only way to get a 1 is to do 1 times 1. And we know that if we were to multiply these, we would get 1x and 1x. But these guys have to cancel out because there is no x terms. There's just x squareds and just plain old constants. So that means one of these has to be a negative, the other has to be a positive, and that is how they're going to cancel each other out. So if this is a negative 1, that means negative 1x, that means that guy has to be a negative 1. And if this is a positive 1x, that means this guy has to be a positive 1. And so our factors are x plus 1 and x minus 1. And there is our factor. So we're still just marching away. And again, we have 4x squared minus 1. Now, the reason why they're calling this a difference of squares is because 4 is 2 times 2. And x squared is x times x. So there's your squares. And so we know that we've got 4x squared here. We've got negative 1 down here. And the way to get, and these are both squares. So the way you get 4x squared is you got 2x times 2x. And the way you get 1, ignore the sign. The way you get the 1 is by doing 1 times 1. And so if we were to multiply these out and get these two values, we would get 2x and 2x. But we know these guys have to cancel each other out because we don't have any terms that have just a plain old x. So that means one of them has to be a negative, the other has to be a positive. That means this needs to be a negative 1, and this has to be a positive 1, and so our factor over here becomes 2x plus 1 and 2x minus 1, and that is our factoring. So again, difference of squares, we've got 25x squared minus 144. So here's our box. We're going to put 25x squared here and 144 here. And we need to know that 25x squared, well, that's 5x times 5x. And that 144, it's supposed to be a negative 144, because it said so right here. But we're going to ignore that sign temporarily, and we know that that is 12 times 12. So if we were to multiply these out to get these values, I would get 60x and 60x, but we need them to cancel each other out. So that means this needs to be a negative 60, and that has to be a positive 60, which means this must be a negative 12, and this has to be a positive 12. So our factors are 5x plus 12 and 5x minus 12. And this is the same thing, only they're kind of switching the numbers around, and it's no big deal. It still works out the exact same. So here, the 100, we're going to put right here, and then the minus x squared, we're going to put down here, minus x squared. All right, and so this is 10 times 10, and this is x times x. So right now we're temporarily ignoring the negative sign. So if we were to fill in these two values, we would get 10x and 10x, but we need them to cancel each other out because we don't have any x's over here. We just have x squareds. So that means this has got to be a negative 10x, and this has got to be a positive 10x. That's how they cancel each other out, which makes this a negative x, makes this a positive x. And so what are our factors? Our factors are 10 plus x, that's this, and then we have 10 minus x. And that are our factors. This is the exact same as that previous problem, actually just smaller numbers, so it's easier. 25 minus x squared. So our box, we know we have 25 here, we have a negative x squared here. Because we're dealing with squares, 5 and 5, x and x. And so our middle terms here become 5x and 5x, but they need to cancel each other out because we don't have any x terms. So that's got to be a negative. This has got to be a positive, which makes that a negative, makes this guy a positive, and that's how these guys cancel out. So what are our factors? Our factors are 5 plus x and 5 minus x. And that is our factors for 25 minus x squared. Believe it or not, this is the exact same thing, it's just uglier. So you've got 64x squared minus 81y squared. So when we put our box here, we know that 64x squared is going to go there, and we know that 81y squared is going to go there. Oh, that's a negative 81y squared. And so now we recognize that these are both squares, because 64x squared, that's 8x times 8x. 8x there. And then we need to recognize, ignore the sign for a second, that 81y squared, well, that's just 9y times 9y. So when we multiply and get these two internal terms here, we're going to get 72xy and 72xy. But we need them to cancel each other out. So that means this guy has to be a negative and this guy has to be a positive, which makes this a negative 9y, makes this a positive 9y. So our factors are 8x plus 9y times 8x minus 9y, and that is our factor. And then this is just more of the same, just gross, big, huge numbers, but it's really, difference of squares is really easy. So this is 169x squared minus 81y squared. So I'm going to make my box. I'm going to put 169x squared, and I'm going to put a negative 81y squared here. And I just need to know that 169, that's 13 times 13, so it's going to be 13x times 13x. That's how we get the 169x squared. Down here, I'm going to temporarily ignore the negative sign. That gives me 9y and 9y. So when we fill in our internal terms, that's going to be 117x and 117 xy and 117 xy. All right, so there, and then, but we need these two terms to cancel each other out. So that's got to be a negative, that's got to be a positive, making this a negative 9y, making this a positive 9y. So our factors are 13x plus 9y times 13x minus 9y. And there are your factors. And the last one, and again, just got to know your times tables on this. So this is 196x squared minus 121y squared. So when we do our box over here, you get 196x squared. We've got negative 121y squared. And so 196, you just got to know that that's 14x times 14x. 14 times 14 is 196. And then the same way, you got to know that 11 times 11 is 121. So that's going to be 11y times 11y. Oh, that's a messed up number here. I need to erase that and make it 11. Make it look like an 11. 11y. Good. All right, so now we multiply. And so 11 times 14 is 154. So that's going to be 154xy. And then up here, 154xy. All right. And we know that these guys have to cancel out. So that makes this guy a negative and that guy a negative. Makes this guy a positive and that guy a positive. And so now we know we have our factors right here, which is 14x plus 11y. That's this guy. And then it's going to be 14x minus 11y. And that's this one right there. And that are our are factors.